From now on, this is our house. Don't come back." I froze the grocery bags, nearly slipping from my hands. My daughter-in-law, Kayla, stood in the doorway with a smirk, her arms crossed like a guard at a gate. Behind her, my own son, my Ethan, looked down at the floor, avoiding my eyes. The locks on the door glistened new and cold, mocking me. My heart pounded as if I'd run a marathon, though all I had done was walk up the front steps of what had always been my home. 2 cardboard boxes sat on the porch stuffed with my clothes, framed photos, even the quilt I had made for Ethan when he was a boy. They had packed up my life as if I were nothing more than an unwanted guest. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, pretending not to stare while Kayla raised her phone recording. "See, she won't leave," she muttered, as if I were some intruder trespassing on sacred ground. But I wasn't a trespasser. This house had been my blood, my sweat, my sacrifice. I had worked decades at the post office, every penny poured into the mortgage until the day the bank stamped paid in full. This place was supposed to be my sanctuary, not the stage for my own humiliation. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My throat ached with betrayal, my chest hollowed by the weight of Ethan's silence. Never in my darkest nightmares did I think my only child would stand by while his wife cast me out like yesterday's trash. Yet even as the sting of rejection burned, one thought cut through the haze. They don't know the truth. They don't know who really owns this house, or what else I know. My name is Linda Walker. I am 58 years old, a widow, and for more than 30 years I worked as a postal clerk in Tacoma, Washington. I sorted endless envelopes and packages, smiling at neighbors who never realized how exhausted I was after double shifts. My life was simple, defined by early morning sore feet and the steady hum of determination. I raised my son Ethan alone after my husband died in a car accident when Ethan was just 9. Every overtime shift, every dollar I saved, every meal I skipped was for him. I wanted Ethan to have opportunities I never had. I packed lunches with extra fruit even when money was tight. I drove an old Chevy that coughed smoke while Ethan wore brand new cleats for soccer. I stood in the rain cheering at his games, the only parent waving until my arms ached. I never complained, not once, because his smile was the only reward I needed. The house we lived in, the one I poured my heart into, was a small craftsman with peeling paint but strong bones. I bought it when Ethan was a toddler. At first, the mortgage felt impossible, but I refused to give up. Each time I signed another check to the bank, I whispered to myself, "One day, this place will be truly ours." By the time Ethan graduated high school, I had made my final payment. The deed bore my name alone, a quiet victory that symbolized years of sacrifice. When Ethan married Kayla, I tried to welcome her as warmly as I could. She was bright, ambitious, always dressed as if she were stepping out of a magazine. She worked in real estate and seemed to know everything about property values, mortgage rates, refinancing options. She often spoke quickly, her words polished, almost rehearsed while I stayed quiet, unsure if she liked me. At first they rented an apartment across town. Then the pandemic hit, jobs slowed, and bills piled up. Ethan came to me one night with pleading eyes. "Mom, we just need a little time. Could we stay with you for a while? Just until we get back on our feet?" How could I say no? He was my son. I told them they could live in the house rent-free for a year. I asked only 3 things: respect my space, help with groceries and utilities, and never sign or alter any financial papers concerning the house without my consent. They agreed readily. Ethan hugging me with gratitude, Kayla smiling too brightly. In those first few weeks, I convinced myself it might even be nice. The sound of laughter in the kitchen again, someone to share Sunday pot roast dinners with, maybe even future grandchildren, filling the rooms with noise. I held on to that hope. But cracks appeared sooner than I expected. Kayla made little comments that stung: how old-fashioned my curtains looked, how my cooking was a bit heavy, how maybe it would be smarter if all bills were routed through her since she was good with numbers. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just trying to fit in, that she didn't mean harm. Ethan, once so attentive, began echoing her opinions. He used to sit at the kitchen table telling me about his day. Now he spent evenings on the couch with Kayla, whispering while glancing at me as if I were a stranger. I noticed fewer thank yous, fewer smiles directed my way. My place in my own home seemed to shrink room by room until I felt like a tenant waiting for permission to exist. Still, I reminded myself I was strong. I had carried heavier burdens before. I told myself families go through adjustments, that kindness and patience would eventually win. But in the quiet of night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, spinning shadows on the wall, I felt a tight knot in my chest. Something about Kayla's eagerness around paperwork, her sly glances when mail arrived, the way Ethan defended her, every suggestion, it all whispered of danger I couldn't yet name. I loved my son too deeply to imagine betrayal, but part of me knew the storm had only begun to form. It started with small slights, things I almost ignored. Kayla complained about my cooking, saying the meals were too heavy, too simple. We're used to healthier options. She would laugh, glancing at Ethan as if I were some relic stuck in the past. I smiled weakly and carried on telling myself not to take it personally, but little by little her words turned sharp, like paper cuts that never healed. The next shift came with money. One morning, as I was sipping my coffee, Kayla placed a binder on the table. Household finances, she announced proudly. Inside were color-coded tabs, spreadsheets, and highlighted bills. From now on, it'll be easier if everything flows through me. Just transfer your pension deposits into the account I manage. That way I can keep track of expenses. I stared at her, stunned. I've managed this house for over 30 years, I said softly. I think I can handle it. She forced a smile. Linda, you've done an amazing job, but things are different now. Interest rates, refinancing opportunities. We should modernize. You wouldn't want to slow us down. Ethan squeezed her hand, nodding in agreement. That was the first time I felt the weight of being outnumbered in my own kitchen. Weeks passed and more boundaries were crossed. My dishes and pots were moved to the basement for storage. My quilt was folded and shoved into a box because it clashed with the decor. One afternoon I came home to find a shiny new lock on the pantry door. Kayla explained with mock cheer, "It's just to keep things organized. Don't worry, I'll handle meal planning from now on." Meal planning, in my house. The more I resisted, the more subtle the manipulation became. Whenever I forgot where I'd placed my glasses, Kayla would sigh dramatically. See, Ethan. This is why we need to think ahead. What if something happens to her? What if she can't make decisions anymore? She would slide a neatly folded document across the table. A power of attorney is just a precaution. Most families do it. I pushed it back every time, refusing to sign. I'm not sick, I snapped once. I don't need anyone making choices for me. Kayla's eyes hardened, but she quickly covered it with a smile. Ethan looked away, ashamed, but silent. Then the mail started arriving, addressed to Kayla Walker at my address. At first I thought it was a clerical error, but soon I noticed envelopes from banks, loan companies, and even a letter about pre-approval for a home equity line of credit. My name wasn't on those letters. Kayla claimed it was junk mail, but I knew better. One night I overheard them in the living room. I had gone to bed early, but the voices drifted upstairs. Kayla's tone was sharp. If your mother would just sign, we could refinance and pull some equity. This place is worth so much more than when she bought it. We're sitting on cash, Ethan. My son's voice was hesitant, tired. She won't go for it. She's stubborn. She won't even notice once it's done, Kayla hissed. Trust me, I know how to handle it. I sat in the dark, heart racing, realizing this wasn't about family. It was about greed. The tension escalated when Ethan confronted me the next morning. Mom, you're making things harder than they need to be. Kayla is just trying to help. Help, I said, my voice trembling. By locking me out of my own pantry, by asking me to sign away my rights. He flinched, but didn't respond. That silence was worse than any insult. Soon after, I received a voicemail from a notary I had never contacted. Just confirming your appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. to finalize the paperwork, the cheerful voice said. My blood ran cold. What paperwork? Whose signature? When I confronted Kayla, she shrugged. Must be a mix-up. These things happen, but I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. The breaking point came on a rainy Saturday. I had planned to spend the day baking bread, something that always calmed me. Instead, I found Kayla standing with two men in suits pointing out features of the house as if she were hosting an open house. When she saw me, she didn't even blush. Relax, Linda, she said smoothly. They're just appraisers, standard procedure. Appraisers for what I demanded. For the future, she said, her smile tight. Ethan stood behind her silent once again. That night the argument erupted. My voice shook with fury I could no longer contain. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. I will not let you steal it from me." Ethan finally raised his voice. "You're making this house impossible to live in. Maybe it would be better if—" He stopped, but the words hung in the air like poison. I stared at him, my only child, the boy I had sacrificed everything for. In that moment, I realized the truth. I was no longer welcome in the very home I had built with my own sweat and love. And I knew Kayla wasn't finished yet. The day it all collapsed was colder than I expected. Rain streaked down the windows of my old Chevy as I drove home from the grocery store. I balanced 2 paper bags in my arms, humming softly to distract myself from the unease that had become constant in my chest. When I reached the porch, I froze. The key I'd carried for decades no longer fit. The lock had been changed. At first I thought I had made a mistake. My hands trembled as I tried again, then again, pressing harder until the key bent slightly. Still nothing. That's when the door opened. Kayla stood there, her hair perfectly styled, her eyes glinting with something cold. "This is our house now," she said flatly. "You need to leave. Don't come back." I stumbled backward, nearly dropping the bags. My heart pounded as I saw 2 cardboard boxes by the steps, my clothes, family photos, and even the quilt I had stitched for Ethan when he was a child had been stuffed inside. My life reduced to boxes in the rain. "Ethan," I gasped, searching for my son. He appeared behind her, his face, pale lips pressed into a thin line. He couldn't even meet my eyes. "Mom," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Maybe it's best if you best if I—" "What?" I interrupted, my voice breaking. "Best if I leave the home I sacrificed everything for, the home I bought with my own hands. Ethan, how can you stand there and watch this?" He looked away, shame flickering across his features, but drowned quickly by silence. Kayla raised her phone, recording me as though I were some intruder. "You're trespassing," she announced loudly. Her tone rehearsed as if she wanted an audience, and she got one. Curtains twitched across the street. A neighbor paused while walking his dog, staring before hurrying away. No one stepped forward. No one defended me. Desperate, I dialed 911. My voice cracked as I explained that my son and his wife had locked me out of my own house. Minutes later, a patrol car arrived. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions cautious. Kayla immediately thrust a folder toward them. "We have a lease agreement," she said confidently. "This property belongs to us now. She's refusing to leave." I stared at the papers. My name wasn't there. Instead, it was a crude document claiming Ethan and Kayla as co-owners, stamped with what looked like an official seal. I knew it was fake, but in that moment in front of uniformed officers, I felt powerless. The younger officer frowned, flipping through the pages. "Ma'am," he said to me, "this looks like a civil dispute. We can't intervene. You'll have to sort this out in court." Court! My knees wobbled, the rain soaking through my coat as humiliation swallowed me whole. "Please," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "This is my home. I have the deed. I've lived here for decades." But my words fell flat against the steady drizzle and Kayla's smug expression. The officers left with a polite nod, their cruiser disappearing down the street. Kayla closed the door slowly, the final click of the lock echoing like a coffin lid. I sank onto the wet steps, clutching the bags of groceries. My bread rolls had spilled onto the concrete, soaking in the rain until they collapsed into mush. I gathered them anyway, shaking my vision blurred by tears. How had it come to this? How had the boy I raised, the child I loved more than life itself, stood silently while his wife cast me out? Every sacrifice, every night of overtime, every dollar saved, it all ended here on a porch where I was no longer welcome. But as I sat there cold and drenched, something hardened inside me. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just a broken old woman abandoned by her own son. They had underestimated me, blinded by greed and arrogance. I wiped my tears and whispered to myself, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." What Kayla and even Ethan didn't realize was that I had never been careless with my future. Long before they moved in, I had sat with an attorney and placed the house in a revocable living trust under my name. That trust made me both trustee and sole beneficiary. No lease, no forged contract, no fake signature could erase the fact that I remained the legal and rightful owner. While they played their games inside my walls, I gathered proof. I retrieved the original warranty deed from my fireproof lockbox at the bank. Every page bore my name alone, every notarized signature a shield stronger than any lie Kayla could spin. I also saved the suspicious mail. I had received letters from lenders addressed to Kayla, documents hinting at applications I had never authorized. Then came the voicemail from the mobile notary. I had replayed it over and over, each word sharpening my resolve. "Just confirming your appointment tomorrow at 2 to finalize the paperwork," the cheerful voice had said. Paperwork I had never scheduled. My hands shook as I recorded the message to a separate device. Evidence. The final piece arrived in my inbox. A fraud investigator from the bank called after I submitted a complaint. His email was blunt. The application for a home equity line of credit listed my property as collateral, but the signature didn't match their records. "We believe this is a case of attempted identity theft," he wrote. My stomach twisted, but at the same time a spark of vindication lit inside me. Kayla had not simply tried to edge me out. She had committed a crime. I knew then that this wasn't just a family dispute. It was a battle for survival, financial, emotional, even legal. They thought I was too old, too timid, too worn down to fight. They thought the humiliation of being locked out would break me. But they were wrong. I walked into my attorney's office carrying a folder so thick it barely closed. Inside were deeds, trust documents, bank letters, notary voicemails, even screenshots from my doorbell camera showing strangers Kayla had invited to inspect the house. My lawyer, a woman with steel gray hair and sharper eyes, flipped through the evidence without a word. Finally, she looked up and said, "Linda, you have everything we need." Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter. The house could not be refinanced, sold, or leased by anyone but me. We also prepared to file for unlawful detainer and eviction lawsuit if Ethan and Kayla refused to leave. And most importantly, we reported the fraudulent loan attempt to the authorities. What Kayla had considered clever manipulation was about to become her downfall. That night alone in the small motel room where I had taken refuge, I laid out the documents on the bedspread. Paper after paper, proof after proof, a fortress built not of walls but of truth. For the first time in months, I felt steady. Yes, they had locked me out. Yes, my son's betrayal had carved wounds deeper than I thought I could endure. But they had underestimated the years of grit it took for me to buy that house, to survive widowhood, to raise a child alone. I was stronger than they remembered, and soon they would find out just how strong. The letter went out first. My attorney mailed it by certified post and hand-delivered a copy to the front door where I once lived. The cease and desist spelled everything out. Ethan and Kayla had no ownership rights, no authority to refinance, lease, or alter the property. They had 7 days to vacate or face legal eviction. The silence that followed was thick, almost deceptive. For a week, I heard nothing. I stayed in my motel room, clutching my folder of evidence like armor. On the 8th day, a sheriff's deputy served them with notice of the unlawful detainer suit. Kayla called my phone within hours, her voice sharp and frantic. "You can't do this. Ethan's your son. We're family." I took a slow breath, my hands steady on the receiver. Family doesn't lock each other out of their homes. Family doesn't forge signatures. You did this to yourself. Then I hung up. The court date came faster than I expected. I dressed carefully that morning, wearing the same navy suit I had used at my husband's funeral. It was the only formal clothing I owned, but it gave me strength. My attorney walked beside me into the courthouse, her briefcase packed with every scrap of evidence we had collected. Inside, Kayla sat ramrod straight at the defense table, her hair perfectly styled, though her hands twitched in her lap. Ethan looked older than his 31 years. Dark circles beneath his eyes, his shoulders slumped. For a fleeting moment, I saw my little boy again, uncertain and scared. But then I remembered the silence on the porch, the way he let Kayla speak for both of them, and I steeled myself. The judge entered. We rose. Then the hearing began. Kayla's lawyer tried to argue first, waiving the so-called lease, as if it were a golden ticket. But my attorney interrupted smoothly, handing over the original deed and the trust documents. "Your Honor," she said, her voice crisp, "this property is owned solely by Linda Walker. The defendants have no claim, and what's more, they have attempted to defraud financial institutions using forged signatures." The judge leaned forward, examining the paperwork. "Mrs. Walker, you are the sole trustee of this trust, yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice firm, though my heart thundered. "I have been from the beginning." My attorney then played the voicemail from the mobile notary. The cheerful voice filled the silent courtroom. "Just confirming your appointment tomorrow at 2 p.m. to finalize the paperwork." The judge's brow furrowed. Kayla's lawyer objected weakly, but the judge waved him off. Next came the email from the bank's fraud department confirming the attempted loan under my name. The judge read it twice, his lips tightening. Finally, the doorbell camera footage appeared on the monitor, strangers measuring windows and inspecting the yard while Kayla hovered beside them. Kayla's face drained of color. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, whispering something to her, but she shook her head. "Mrs. Walker," the judge said at last, his tone heavy with authority, "the evidence is overwhelming. The court recognizes you as the sole owner of the property. The defendants are ordered to vacate the premises immediately. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation into possible fraud and identity theft." The gavel struck. The sound rang through the courtroom like thunder. Kayla's composure shattered. "This is ridiculous," she cried, rising to her feet. I was only trying to help. Ethan reached for her arm, but she pulled away, glaring at me with eyes that burned with fury. For once, though, her words held no power. The law had spoken. Outside the courthouse, reporters hovered, tipped off by the nature of the case. I said nothing, slipping past the cameras, clutching my attorney's arm. Behind me, Kayla argued loudly with Ethan, her voice breaking. Ethan glanced at me, once his face twisted with regret, but I turned away. My trust had been broken too deeply to mend. Within days, the house was mine again. The sheriff supervised their departure, ensuring they took only their belongings. I stood on the porch as movers carried out their suitcases. The new locks gleamed in the sunlight. Neighbors watched quietly, some nodding at me, others whispering. I didn't care. The humiliation I had endured was finally lifting. Inside, the house smelled like fresh paint and lemon cleaner Kayla's touch. I opened windows, letting in crisp air. Then I walked to the kitchen, placing my old quilt back across the sofa, reclaiming the space inch by inch. That night, Ethan came alone. He stood on the porch, shoulders hunched. "Mom," he whispered, his eyes glassy. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how far she'd go. I should have stood up for you." Pain and love warred inside me. I wanted to hold him, to tell him everything could be as it once was. But I couldn't erase the image of his silence, his complicity. "Ethan," I said softly, "I love you. You'll always be my son. But love doesn't mean I let myself be abused. If you want to rebuild trust, it has to start with honesty, yours, not hers." He nodded, tears sliding down his face, then walked away into the night. For the first time in months, I locked the door behind me and felt safe. The house was mine, and so was my dignity. When the dust finally settled, I stood in my living room and looked around. The quilt was back on the sofa, sunlight streamed through freshly cleaned windows, and the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt like peace. For weeks I had been haunted by the image of cardboard boxes on my porch and the sting of my son's silence. But now, with every breath, I reclaimed more than just a house. I reclaimed myself. I realized something vital through all of this love does not mean surrender. I raised Ethan with every ounce of strength I had, but that did not give him or his wife the right to strip away my dignity. Family should be built on respect, not manipulation. And while forgiveness is possible, forgetting is not. To anyone listening, I want this story to be more than gossip about a broken household. I want it to be a warning and a lesson. Protect what you've built. Understand your rights. Do not let greed or fear silence you. Even when betrayal comes from within your own walls, you are not powerless. I will always love my son, but I will never again allow myself to be treated as if I were disposable. This house, my home, stands as proof sacrifice deserves honor, and boundaries are not signs of weakness. They are signs of strength.